Ciao amici, and welcome back to Experience Italy with Friends. Today we're heading to a part of Italy that many travelers typically don't get to right away. But once you do, it stays with you. A place that feels different, more rugged, more authentic, and in some ways a little surprising. From the ancient cave dwellings of Matera to the storybook trulli of Puglia and the dramatic cliffs of the Adriatic coast, this was a trip that really expanded how we see southern Italy. In this episode, we're sharing our experience exploring this region, what we loved, what surprised us, and how to think about including it in your own trip. Let's get started. Andiamo! Experience Italy with Friends is a travel and lifestyle podcast where we will explore our favorite destinations and hidden gems, share key travel tips and cultural insights, and provide real-time updates about our move to this remarkable country. Join me, Tanya Razzo, an Italian travel expert and founder of Amici Vacations, and my Italian husband and producer, Davide Razzo, on a journey that is sure to inspire you and prepare you to create immersive and authentic experiences of your own in the beautiful country of Italy. Ciao, everyone, and thanks for joining us again. I'm Tanya, and as always, I'm here with my husband and co-host, Davide.
Buongiorno, amici!
So today we're heading to southern Italy, and I'm actually really excited about this one, Davide. You know, we realized recently that we've been talking a lot about northern Italy and Tuscany, which, it makes sense since we live here.
Yeah.
But it also made us realize that we've yet to talk about one of our more special travel experiences in southern Italy, specifically Matera and Puglia. And it's definitely time we share it.
You're absolutely right. Better late than never. I love this topic because, all these regions of Italy, they have all a different vibe. And, people imagine something else.
They sure do. And what's interesting is that this was a bit of a discovery journey for us too. We've been traveling to Italy since 1997, and it wasn't until 2022 that we actually spent meaningful time in this area.
I mean, it's kind of surprising if you think about it.
It is, but also I think it's actually quite typical, right? For a lot of travelers, and clearly for us too, southern regions like Puglia and Basilicata aren't usually part of a first trip to Italy. People tend to focus on the classics, Rome, Florence, Venice, and maybe the Amalfi Coast.
Exactly. So, but once you start coming back to Italy, you always want to discover something new. And so I think that's a chance. That's, for some people.
No, and I think that's what it was for us too. This wasn't a check the boxes trip. It was a discovery trip. We didn't fully know what to expect. And that's part of what made it so interesting. So in today's episode, we're going to share our experience exploring Matera and parts of Puglia. What surprised us, what we loved, what we didn't love so much, and how to think about including this region in your own trip.
I think you will find out that it's completely different than you think what it would be. So
yeah, and it's a region that's still a bit under the radar for many travelers, which makes it even more fun to talk about.
Okay.
But hey, before we head south, let's do a quick life update here in Montepulciano. Things are starting to wake up a bit. April 1st really marks the beginning of the tourist season here, and you can feel it.
Yeah, you definitely can. There's more life on the streets of Montepulciano. I've seen it in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, there's so much more life, a lot more people, restaurants are reopening, shops are coming back to life. And, even just talking with our local partners, you can tell everybody is geared up and ready for the new season. And it's that kind of moment where everything starts moving again, happening again.
I know. And you've been busy too. So with your clients to get them ready.
Yeah, I have been busy. All of this starts to happen April 1st, but I've been working behind the scenes for the last couple of months and, working on the trips, building the itineraries, working with suppliers. And for me, it's exciting because now all the trips start to come to fruition. And, some of them have been. I have clients here last week. I have clients arriving tomorrow. So, the season is in effect.
I've been busy too, Tanya. We are renovating our apartment, as people know that are our listeners, and I'm actually having fun. I'm doing exactly what I used to do before I was a music producer. So I'm back in my element.
You love it.
I do. I mean, it's great. It's been going okay. And the contractors are really nice. And, it's nice to go just every day. So
I know it gives you something to do. And I think you're getting, having a lot of fun getting involved. And for me, it's really fun to actually see the work begin. The demo has started. And so you've been sending me pictures and then we go see it every couple of days. And, it finally feels real after all this talking about it and designing it on paper. And I've actually been surprised how quick the demo has been going. It's kind of a pleasant surprise.
Yeah, but you know what? Let's keep this for a episode that we want to do once it's done. For now, let's just head south.
Yes, no, it's going to be really fun to recap the entire experience when it's all said and done. But I agree. Let's head to Puglia.
All right.
So, Davide, do you remember that our first experience with Puglia was actually back in 2003?
Oh, yeah, I do remember. We were a week in Tuscany first, and then we visited Umbria. And then from Umbria, we drove down to Lecce to go to a wedding. So...
Yeah, exactly. And so it was more of an event trip than it was a travel experience for us. We were here traveling in Tuscany and Umbria, and then we're like, okay, well, let's go to this wedding before we go to Calabria. And, on the drive down, it was a long drive. I remember it was beautiful, but it was, very mountainous, a lot of forests, and then the wedding itself was such a cultural moment, and it was beautiful and very ornate church in Lecce, probably Baroque. But beyond that, we really didn't explore the region.
Do you remember the ornate priest in that church yelling at my cousin that got married because she was an hour late?
Well, that's a whole other story, Davide.
I know. I mean, for people like, they go in the South, and they only think of as of a beach, family kind of destination, So,
well, I mean, it was exactly my mindset. Like, I just kind of bucketed all of southern Italy together. And, that's honestly how I thought of it for years. I wasn't aware of the different regions. I had never heard of Matera or Trulli or any of the things we're going to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly how my people think of it. So,
yeah, I agree. And, it wasn't until much later, it was like 2022 that Puglia came back on our radar. We were on the Amalfi Coast doing a research trip. And one of the drivers we were working with mentioned that Puglia was becoming really popular.
Yeah, I mean, he mentioned that and said, really? And, oh yeah, it's a very trendy hotspot right now. I said, okay, so maybe.
Yeah, I was thinking, okay, maybe we need to learn more about this place if that's where everyone is going, maybe the new hidden gem. And so later that fall, when we were spending about 6 weeks in Calabria with your family, we decided to carve out a week and go explore, like just get in the car and go.
And it was in December, so not the good time to go. So,
well, not the typical time to go for sure. But in some ways, I think it made it really quite, more interesting. But before we get into what we experienced, it's probably helpful to take a step back and explain where this region actually is because, I think many people may not be familiar with it.
Yeah. Okay. So Puglia, if you look at the Italy map, which looks like a boot, it's the heel part, and it's a very long, coast at the Adriatic Sea.
Well, and it's quite big, right? I mean, it's a large region, and then just west of it, a little more inland is the region of Basilicata, which is where Matera is located.
Yeah, and then a lot of people think that Matera is associated with Puglia because it's thrown in there in an itinerary like that.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like people, I think, always see Matera as part of a trip to Puglia. But I mean, it's actually in Basilicata. And I think part of the confusion too is that, the borders have shifted a bit over the years because Matera started in Puglia. And then it was around like the mid 1600s that it shifted to the region of Basilicata, and it's been there since. But from a travel perspective, I think that it really does kind of feel like a common region.
Yeah, I mean, especially when you drive through, you feel like, oh yeah, we haven't left the region. So
no, and it's exactly what we did, right? We were in the car and we started in Matera, but, we went to the whole area with a pretty loose plan. Like we didn't have a ton of expectations. I had done a little bit of research ahead of time and leaned on some of the recommendations we had received. But, I think it's worth saying, what we're sharing today isn't meant to be a comprehensive guide to Puglia or Basilicata. This was simply our route and our experience exploring this region for the first time.
Yeah, I mean, there's much more to see in that region of Puglia, especially the very south of it. It's beautiful where the church was,
Yeah.
But for today, I think we just stick with our plan.
No, exactly. And the way we structured it ended up being a really great introduction to this part of Italy. So I'm excited to share it with everyone.
Okay, so let's start with what, Tanya?
So, Matera was our first stop on this journey. And I have to say, this place completely blew me away. I had no idea a place like this even existed in the world.
Yeah, I think it was our first big wow moment of that trip. I mean, it's a place that's very hard to describe, until you see it.
No, it really is. And, I still say it's probably the most unique city I've visited in Italy, if not the world. Like, when you arrive, you're looking out over these ancient cave dwellings carved directly into the rock. Like, it almost doesn't even feel real.
I know, it's like a movie set. I mean, that area, it's called the Sassi. Okay, so that's what we're talking about. And it's basically, it's a network of homes, churches, and streets all carved into the canyon, into the rocks.
Yeah, and what fascinated me is that this isn't just something, like built to look old. It was how people actually lived and for centuries. And not even that long ago, people were still living in these caves without modern utilities, like up until the late 1960s.
Yeah, can you think of that? I mean, no running water, no electricity. For that reason alone, Matera was called the shame of Italy in the early 60s. We were told that the president at the time of Italy was standing right at the edge of the Sassi and said, "This is the shame of Italy. We need to change something there." So
yeah, because people were just living in such almost prehistoric conditions.
Prehistoric conditions.
But it's so hard to imagine when you see it today because, one of my favorite parts was visiting a small museum that recreated what life was like, inside one of these homes back then. And there were no windows, just a door. Sometimes animals were housed inside too. And families shared courtyards, ovens, everything. Like, it really puts things into perspective, this completely different way of living.
I mean, that was very common back then. I mean, you had the oven for the whole town. And so that's what they had that too. But yeah.
No, it was incredible. And, and it's amazing to see how the city has evolved because today you have this contrast where like some of these caves have been transformed into beautiful hotels, restaurants, and spaces while still preserving that history. And we slept in a cave hotel and it was so cool because, it didn't have any windows. It's lit mostly by candles, a couple of like electric light fixtures they finally put inside. But it was such a unique experience. We have this like modern elements in a cave.
It was definitely a first for me. So, but it was cool. I thought that, being in December, it would be humid and cold in there, but it was pleasant.
It was such an experience that in and of itself. And it was, kind of magical, kind of like romantic. And, I would say that's the whole town of Matera, and especially at night. Like, I describe it as being magical because, even with all when the city lights were lit up, it looked like a nativity scene.
And it was Christmas time too, Tanya, right?
Right. So, it was fitting. Like, it looked like this nativity scene. And some of my favorite photos from that trip were from Matera at night. Like, it just sparkled and, in contrast, like you could see the stars in the sky. And I have like the best photo.
You have to imagine that the old Matera was going down. And so there's all these homes, carved into the caves, as caves. And then across the canyon, there's the very old part of Matera, which was used as a movie backdrop. And on top of those Sassi stands today the modern Matera. So, the landscape is very dramatic if you there. So
that totally surprised me. The gorges and the cliffs surrounding the city. It feels like a different world compared to what people imagine when they think of Italy. And It was just such a different vibe.
Yeah, I mean, I would say Matera isn't a place that somebody should just be rushed into and just go, like spend an hour and then go. I mean, you have to at least spend a night there.
Well, and I would say you actually need at least 2 nights.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, you are the expert.
But no, I mean, like you had like, there's just too much to do in just a quick day trip or a quick stop doesn't give it justice. And I mean, it is this open air museum. Like you want time to walk, to explore, get lost a little and take it all in. And I think having the experience of time during the day and time in the evening, being able to sleep in a cave.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, we stayed 2 nights. I felt like, we could have stayed longer to actually explore it. I mean, we never went to those old parts of Matera, the very ancient ones. And I would have loved to go there too. So
no, I agree. And like, I would have loved to have even gone like hiking or biking in the surrounding area. I mean, the weather when we were there wasn't maybe ideal to do some of the outdoor things, but in summer, I think you would have a lot more to add on just to seeing the town. And, I do want to share too a couple of quick facts because I think they help explain why, Matera feels so special. It's believed to be one of the oldest continuously inhabited cities in the world. And, for that reason, it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It was actually the first site in southern Italy to be added to the list.
Yeah, and I mentioned before, it was used as a backdrop for movies. And one of the movies was the James Bond No Time to Die movie.
Yep.
And in 2021, and we were just...
like right after that.
Yes. So, and then the other movie, which was more important, was The Passion of the Christ. I mean, because it resembled Jerusalem a lot.
Yeah, and we were on a walking tour and our guide shared with us that, Mel Gibson picked Matera because he said he thought it looked more like ancient Jerusalem did than even modern Jerusalem does.
Yeah.
So how strange that they picked a different city to represent ancient Jerusalem. But overall, I would say Matera was one of those places that completely exceeded any expectation that I had. And honestly, like I wish it were easier to include in more itineraries because I think I would send everyone there. Like it's that unique.
You have sent people and they were always amazed about that place. So
they are, but it's just not as easy to fit into an itinerary as we'll talk about, later.
Yeah.
But, I loved Matera, but we have to continue on our journey.
Yeah, where did we go next, Tanya?
So after that, we crossed over into officially the region of Puglia and headed into an area known as the Val d'Itria.
Valle d'Itria.
I was close.
You were very close, Tanya.
Well, this is really when, the landscape started to shift a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit different than Matera, for sure. I mean, this area is known, for its rolling countryside, agriculture, especially olive oil production. You see those massive ancient olive trees, like some of them are thousands of years old.
Yeah, I remember that clearly. Like the olive trees here felt different. They were huge, like almost sculptural, like something from a cartoon or a movie. And you really get a sense that agriculture, especially olive oil, is a big part of life in this region.
Yeah, you're right. And I mean, not only huge trees, the olives themselves were huge. So, but what you also see is different than in any other regions or even in the world. But I think that's those little homes called the trulli.
Yeah, our first stop was Alberobello. And, this honestly felt like stepping into a storybook. I mean, I kept saying they looked like something out of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, but you thought Smurf huts, and now I have that stuck in my head.
Yeah. Definitely Smurf huts. Definitely. I mean, they really look like that. I think they got inspired by those trullis.
I would not doubt that.
But what makes Alberobello so special? It's, they just don't have a few of those. I mean, that's in the entire city, and there are over 1,000 of them. And that's why UNESCO called them also a World Heritage Site.
Yeah, no, I mean, and that's what surprised me being in this little town is that it wasn't just charming. Like, it's just so architecturally different from anywhere else in Italy. You just have to imagine, and I'm going to post some pictures on our Facebook page, but these limestone huts, they have these cone-shaped roofs, like just picture watching the Smurfs. And it's just not something you see anywhere else. Like, they're just cute and charming.
And just a curiosity fact that we learned too is that the early ones that they were built without mortar or cement. So, and the reason why they did that, again, because of taxes, you pay taxes on your dwelling if it's fixed, and because it could be, dismantled again, so it wasn't fixed. So they didn't pay taxes on that.
OMG, just what people won't do to avoid taxes, talk about a loophole. We'll just take our house apart.
Yep.
But, aside from that, I would say, the trulli are just so unique and visually striking. And here again, we stayed in a trullo because they have a hotel, they made them out of trullos. And it just made the experience even more immersive. I felt like one of the dwarfs or Smurfs living in this trullo, and it was so cute. And so, I don't know, it was one thing to walk through the town, but quite another to just sleep in one. So definitely encourage it.
Yeah, it was really a different vibe, and I really appreciate it, though. I kind of felt it, sleeping in there, and I really kind of felt like a Smurf at the end.
And then from Alberobello, we explored a couple of nearby towns, which made really easy, day trips. And it's one of the things I loved about the area is that everything was so close together. So one of the day trips we did was Loco Rotondo.
Yeah, that's a very beautiful town. Love it, love it. It's actually considered one of the most beautiful villages in Italy. Did you know that?
No, I don't doubt that.
And, Rotondo means round.
Well, and that makes sense, right? The old town is actually circular, which gives it, a really unique layout as you wander through it. And, there's not actually a ton to technically do there. But that's kind of the point. You just walk, take it all in, enjoy the atmosphere. And when we were there at Christmas, the decorations were over the top. And we were told the local businesses compete with each other. And in summer, they do something similar with flowers. So it's very visually driven and just over the top charming.
I could tell that town has a lot of pride, on the people that live there and how they present themselves. So.
Yeah, no, for sure. And we had one of our favorite lunches there.
Yes.
So good. We'll talk about Puglian food here soon.
Yes.
But it was just one of those places that everything came together and it was just a perfect day.
Yeah. Okay. So then I remember we went to Martina Franca, which was the next town we went to visit. Completely different.
Yeah. It's still beautiful, but I would say it was less storybook and a bit more elegant. Mm-hmm. I remember more of the Baroque architecture. The buildings were a little bit more grand. It had this beautiful church. And again, because it was Christmas, I remember this over the top nativity scene inside the church. So the town overall was I would say less cutesy, mm-hmm. but very charming in its own way. And also, the Christmas decorations were amazing.
Yeah, it felt a little bit more refined, if I can say that. Overall, that part of Puglia felt very easy to explore, I think. You can base yourself somewhere there, and then you can do day trips like we did. So, and you don't have to rush to it, No,
it's very relaxed. Definitely slow travel.
Yeah.
Loved it. And, I think it was a really convenient location. And then as we continued our journey, we next made our way over to the town of Ostuni, which is often referred to as the White City. And I'll be honest, I had pretty high expectations for this town because it's one of the more talked about towns in Puglia. And from a distance, it's really striking. The mm-hmm. whole town sits up on a hill and is completely whitewashed. And so it almost glows, especially in the sunlight. And, it's also very well located. It's close to the coast, which I think is a big part of its appeal.
Yeah, I think so. But maybe we have missed something while there, but Ostuni is often used as a base in the summer for people because it's close to the beach and it kind of has that feel of a resort town, like when you go to Mexico or somewhere, and that's maybe why people like to go there.
Yeah, maybe. And I think that's where maybe timing just plays a really big role. And because we were there in December, mm-hmm. this was probably, the one stop that didn't quite land the way we expected. And we just spent one night. And while we enjoyed walking around and had some really good meals, the overall feeling was a bit quieter, maybe even a little worn or tired in certain areas. And it just had that beach town ghost
Yes.
vibe where you going to a beach town in winter just doesn't quite hit the mark. And I don't know, it just didn't have the same charm or energy that we felt in places like Alberobello and Local Rotondo.
Again, I wasn't impressed. And I think if we were there in summer, I think we would have enjoyed it better.
Yeah, I agree. But, let's continue our journey to our next and final stop, which was Polignano and Mare. And, this was definitely, a very special place as well. And I'm so glad we fit it into our trip. And, it just had this incredible setting. The town is perched right on the top of these dramatic limestone cliffs overlooking the Adriatic. And the water is that very deep, clear blue. And everything feels just a little bit cinematic.
It just reminds me of a song, Tanya.
Uh-oh.
Volare, whoa, cantare, whoa.
I'm sorry.
Nel blu, dipinto di blu, felice di stare lassù. Did you know that the guy who wrote this song was actually born in Polignano Mare?
I did not, but I remember as part of the Christmas decorations there, they had those words strung into the lights. And I thought it was just a popular Italian song, did not connect it to the specific town.
Yeah, Polignano Mare, I loved it too. It had this long history of coastal settlements. And because of its position on the cliffs, it was, naturally protected and became an important point along the Adriatic Sea. I really love that. You see pictures everywhere from the homes right on the cliff.
Yeah, and you feel this this historic vibe as you're walking through it, and there's something almost like windswept. And I kept thinking of, you're going to find this so cheesy, but after you're singing, I get to be cheesy. Wuthering Heights. I know it's not Italy, but it has that same kind of dramatic, slightly moody atmosphere, like the moors of England.
Yeah, especially, with the sea and the cliffs. And it gives that feeling. Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, okay. Thanks for agreeing with me.
Yes.
But, even though we were there in December, I think for that reason, it still felt special. We spent a lot of time just walking along the coastline, looking out over the water and exploring the old town. And then, of course, there was this famous cave restaurant. Do you remember it? It was built right into the cliffs. And you're like, huh?
Grotta Palazzese.
Yeah,
Yes.
it was closed for the season, so we couldn't eat there, but we saw it from above. And I have to say, it looked pretty magical. And I'm sure it's, of course, touristy, but at the same time, these places are popular for a reason. When was the last time you got to have dinner in this cutout grotto?
You definitely pay for the location. It's a unique setting. The food might not be the best. It's still good food. That's what I heard. But you're paying definitely for the setting. So
yeah, it's incredible. And so, overall, I thought Polignano just had this really nice balance, and it felt more lively than some of the other places we visited, but still intimate, still very atmospheric. Even in December. So I can only imagine how beautiful it would be in summer, when people can actually swim and there's more boats along the coast and everything is open. But even in the off season, I think it had this magic. And again, these Christmas decorations, I feel like that was one of the things that surprised me traveling in December, because up until, and maybe this was my first real winter in Italy, right? And we got to do a lot of traveling around to see the Christmas decorations. And I think it was just very unique and magical to have that part of the experience.
What I was surprised, Tanya, was that it actually reinforced my theory of Polignano not being just a tourist town, but actually a town that people live, because we heard them every night outside of our hotel room. And we go, oh my God, when are they going home? And it was midnight, at 1 a.m., 2 a.m., and that in the middle of winter. So can you imagine in summer?
No, it would be hopping. No, it was, I loved it. But I think here, it's making me remember the seafood we ate while we were in Polignano. So let's switch gears to food, always one of our favorite topics.
Favorite topic.
It was a highlight for me. And, what stood out right away for me was that it's a little bit different than what we're used to here in Tuscany, of course.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, it's definitely very rustic kind of and comforty food.
Yeah, especially maybe in winter. It had a great role to have comfort food then. But I think the ingredients are very simple, very local, very focused on the ingredients. So I think in that way, that is very common of Tuscany too. Each region really utilizes what they have and makes it their own. So simple, but amazing. And one of the things I remember we saw everywhere was the orecchietti and those little ear-shaped pasta that's typical of Puglia. And probably didn't say that right. Orecchiette?
Orecchiette, brava. Okay. Yes. It's probably the most famous pasta from that region. And usually it's served with either cime di rapa or sausage or both together. So,
no, it was very good. And I always remember lots of vegetables. But of course, as I mentioned, being along the coast, there was lots of seafood.
Yes. Very fresh with very simple preparations.
No, I was looking back on pictures to kind of get re-jazzed up for this. And we had mussels and we had like a calamari pasta. I don't know, it was just very yummy. I remember being very satisfied in this region.
Yeah, because of the generous portions.
And then also what stood out to me was just how often we were served the great antipasti spreads, the local cheeses, the cured meats, a lot of vegetables. I think they have this special pepper, that we had, especially in, Matera and breads, and just every meal had something incredible.
The one thing that you forgot to say too is they have a special cheese there in Puglia, which is the burrata.
Yeah, I'd forgotten about that.
Yes. So burrata is it's kind of mozzarella shaped, fresh mozzarella shaped, but it's creamy inside. So it's a different kind of cheese than a mozzarella cheese. Goes well with just alone with maybe tomatoes or as a spread on bread or even in pasta. So sometimes.
Yeah, and I guess, we mentioned the trees before, but we have to mention the olive oil.
Oh, yeah.
Which, especially now that we've recently done an episode on olive oil, I think we appreciate even more. And you can really taste it there. It's used everywhere and adds so much flavor.
Yeah. Puglia is one of the largest producer of olive oil in Italy. So...
No, which makes sense once you've seen the olive trees we talked about.
Yes.
They're huge. You guys, you have to go online and look at a picture of an olive tree, or maybe I'll have to post one because they're ginormous. But overall, I would say the food here was very simple, very rustic, very comforting, not overly refined, but incredibly satisfying.
Very.
But you always eat good in Italy.
Love it. What was your favorite one? What was your favorite dish?
Oh my gosh, I don't know. I did love all the orecchiette pasta.
Yeah, I think so. And the seafood pastas were special too because the seafood is local. So,
right. It's right there. And of course, burrata. I love cheese. It's my favorite food. Everything. So, hey, let's take a little, look back on the trip. And it really feels like a series of very, distinct moments. And, Matera completely blew us away, right? That sense of awe and disbelief. How does a place like this exist? Then Alberobello felt almost whimsical, stepping into a storybook with the trulli and, the Smurf huts or dwarf cottages, depending on who you ask. And then places like Loco Rotondo, just beautiful, atmospheric, the kind of place where you just wander and take it all in. Astuni, okay, maybe not our favorite, but I actually think that added to the experience. It gave us perspective. And then we ended in Polignano and Mare, which, felt romantic, a little dramatic.
Yes.
Almost cinematic with cliffs and seas to inspire Davide to sing.
Yes, volare. No. I think that trip was really nice because it had a mix of everything. So,
exactly. But, I also want to re-highlight that this was just our route. There's actually a lot more to this region than what we saw. And even within our trip, we were crossing between areas that, feel really quite different from each other.
Yeah, definitely. Because I mean, Puglia is very large, very elongated, right? A lot of coast, a lot of beaches. But I think one of my favorite towns is on the very tip south, Santa Maria di Leuca, I think it's called. That's where my cousin got married. It was so unique that the architecture in that room in that town, and so there's a lot more to see.
No, especially. And I think, I want to mention a few of these popular places so that we give it a bit more of a complete picture of at least Puglia. There's Bari, which is the larger city that everyone, mostly flies into if you're coming by air. And
that's where the Orecchiette were born.
Yeah, and that's more of a working city. And it has a really interesting historic center. And it's known for the women who are making fresh orecchiette pasta, like right on the streets. Like I think it was on a Stanley Tucci show.
That's very authentic.
Yeah.
I mean, especially, that the food culture is very authentic.
Yeah. And then you have towns like Monopoly, not the game, but Monopoly, which I've heard, is really charming along the coast. It's smaller, picturesque, also right on the water. And we didn't spend time in Lecce on this trip, but, Davide, you just mentioned it, that we'd been there for the wedding.
Yeah,
and
my aunt lives in Lecce. And so as a kid, we would go there occasionally. But seriously, I do not remember much, but it's beautiful.
Well, I'm going to point out that it's, the Baroque architecture, and it's often called the Florence of the South.
Oh.
So,
okay.
Just for those who are a little bit more into that Renaissance flair, you can get some of that in the Puglia region. And then even further down is Otranto, which combines, the coastal views and has a lot of, I think, maritime history in the area. I mean, you're getting quite close to the Middle East and Mediterranean, the whole region there. So I can imagine the history that's there. And, I guess the point is there's a lot here to explore. And what we experienced was just one version of a Puglia itinerary.
I mean, yes, you can go easily back. We could go and just explore all those places too. So
no, and I think it's why the region is so interesting, and it still feels a bit under the radar compared to other parts of Italy. And there's just a lot of depth once you start exploring.
Yeah. Well, it gives us a reason to go back.
Let's do it.
All right.
So, as we wrap up our journey through Matera and Puglia, I think the big question that remains, becomes, is this the right kind of trip for everyone? Because as much as we loved it, it is a little different than some of the more classic Italy itineraries.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely feeling different than like Rome, Venice, or Florence.
No, for sure.
I mean, those places, they are unique, but the places we visited in Puglia too. So.
Well, just very different. And, I think that's actually what makes it so special, but it also means it's not always the easiest fit depending on the type of trip that you're planning. And, first from a logistics standpoint, it's a bit more removed from the typical route. Like, it's not something that just naturally fits into a first trip where you're already trying to see the major highlights.
Yes, you definitely have to want to go there because it's not on a route to any other major cities like Rome, Florence, or Venice. So if you go there for that reason alone.
Right. And, and beyond the logistics, it also just feels a little different when you're there. I mean, it's more rugged, more local, less polished in a way. And, not in a negative sense, but it's not as tourist acclimated as some of the more visited parts of Italy.
I mean, it feels more authentic. I mean, it's a little bit less structured for visitors too. That's the downside on that. It's not like Venice.
Well, no, exactly. And so I think I want to kind of mention this for travelers who are newer to Italy or even newer to international travel. I mean, it can feel like a bigger leap to go to areas that, we consider to be the authentic, off the beaten path.
You're right.
Because by definition, they're a little bit rugged. I mean, you don't have the smooth road. It's off the beaten path. And places like Rome or Florence are a bit easier to navigate. They're a bit more intuitive. They're tourist friendly.
Yeah. I mean, you have to be a little bit more flexible, I think, when you get there.
Yep. And, that's just also, you want to highlight that the reality of the iconic places are iconic for a reason. And so for a lot of people, it's hard to skip those on a first trip. And so, I completely understand that. And so that's just why I think...
Of course. I mean, yeah, again, you want to go there. So,
but I just want to highlight to everybody, I think this is a region that is something you layer in once you've experienced some of the major highlights of Italy. And or if you're somebody who already knows you prefer going a bit deeper, a bit off the beaten path, then this region might feel right for you. But it's less about checking off major monuments or museums, more about the overall experience, the landscapes, the towns, the food, the atmosphere. So
yeah, I mean, it's more about the experience of just to see a place, so.
And, for the right traveler, it can be incredibly rewarding. And, that's really what I want to try to help my clients figure out is not just where to go, but what kind of experience they want to have. And does it fit in nicely into their trip or not? Is it the first trip? Is it second trip? Is it third trip?
Yeah. I mean, I just want to add one last thing before we're going to wrap this up. I think Puglia is also chosen by many expats to go live there because it is more quiet. Beaches, excellent food, it's why not?
and very authentic.
Exactly. Well, as we are wrapping up this episode, Tanya, we're getting to our favorite segment of the podcast, Tips from Tanya. Tips from Tanya.
All right, let's hope I can live up to that intro. I've got 3 tips for this episode because this is definitely a region where a little planning will go a long way. So first, we already mentioned logistics a little bit, but this is probably the biggest difference compared to other parts of Italy. So most people will fly into Bari if you're coming by air. And so this is the main hub in the region.
Okay.
You can take trains to some of the coastal towns, but once you get into places like the Val d'Itria and want to visit Matera, it becomes a bit more complicated. So, there are buses to Matera, but they're not the most efficient. So
and not reliable.
Yeah. So in most cases, I really recommend having a car. Like similar to how we recently talked about Tuscany, it just gives you so much more flexibility and makes the experience more enjoyable. And I'll also say this region takes a little time to get to. It's not next to all these other places. And, I've had clients that wanted to combine it with places like the Amalfi Coast.
Right.
And it's doable. We did it. But you need to expect you're going to take 3 to 5 hours of travel depending on where you're going. And it's never just a quick hop on the highway. These are, again, mountains. They kind of disrupt travel in Italy. And in this region, it just takes a bit of a time. So you need to be very thoughtful about how you plan your itinerary, the logistics to the space.
Yeah, that's how we learned about this region to go visit is because the one driver in the Amalfi Coast, he would bring clients there. And so he would explain, 3-5 hours we're there. I'm going to hang out there and they'll do tours and all that. And then I'll just drive them around.
Yeah, he did it as 3-day trips.
Yeah, it's a 3-day trip. It's all paid and,
Yeah. So, but it's just logistically a little bit harder to get to than some of the classic places.
Exactly. Okay, so what's your next tip, Tanya?
So, when to go, right? We talked about seasons quite a bit because we went during Christmas. Puglia is known for its beaches and summer energy. That's when everything is open, when it's at its liveliest. And to be honest, even in Tuscany, when we talk with people here, where do they go for summer? Ferragosto, they head to Puglia. But we went in December, and I have to say it was really special, as we've been talking about, and it just is a different kind of trip. So instead of focusing on the coast and beach time, you're leaning into the towns, the culture, the food, and in our case, the Christmas atmosphere, which was actually beautiful and a little over the top. And, as I was reflecting on it, it's sort of because I grew up in Florida, I can understand that you can go a bit crazy putting up decorations when you're not freezing.
No freezing required. Only Minnesota.
So they had time. You have time to put up these crazy decorations without freezing. And it's, another bonus is exploring the hill towns without the summer heat was actually quite nice. Because I can just imagine, as beautiful as Matera is, just given all that rock and stone, that if it's 95 degrees and sunny, it would be...
You want to go in those sassy, in those caves.
Yeah, so it'd be a little toasty. So that's the downside. And then maybe what you want to do is some of the exploring in the evenings. But winter was a good time to go.
Okay.
Last tip, how do you structure this into your overall trip? And I just want to say that there's absolutely enough here to justify having its own itinerary. Like if you just went to Puglia, like we spent a week there.
Yep.
And I feel like as we mentioned, there were places more we could have added on. And in the summer, I would want to have a day or two to hang on the beach and not just be exploring. But you can add in other parts. I mean, you could add on the Amalfi Coast, like I mentioned. There's Calabria right next door. You could go south to Sicily.
Or Pescara. I've heard it's beautiful.
Yeah.
North Foggia, which is still in Puglia, but north of Foggia is Pescara. It's beautiful there.
Right. And, but I just want to say, keep in mind that if you're combining some of these southern regions, the overall feel can be, somewhat similar. It's coastal, it's relaxed, it's more laid back. So you're not getting maybe a ton of contrast as you would if you were like pairing like Venice or the Dolomites and then take a flight and then add on Puglia. So you just have to kind of figure out what kind of trip you're after.
Yeah. All right. Very helpful, Tanya, as usual. Okay, so, well, that was a fun episode for me. I mean, just, going down memory lane a little bit.
No, it was, and I can't believe it was 2022 that we did this because it feels like it was much more recent than that. But, what surprised me is like, as I was preparing for the episode, I went back and looked at some of my Instagram stories from that trip. And it was kind of amazing to see that I had captured those exact same feelings, in my outline already.
Yeah.
And so I was like, the awe of Matera, the charm of Alberobello, like how much I love Locorotondo, like even my reaction to Astuni. So it just made me realize like how impactful that trip really was and how those emotions like stuck with me like all these years later.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it says a lot about the place and you should repost those stories on our Experience Italy with Friends Facebook page, I think.
No, I think that's a good idea. And I'll post pictures of the food and all the places and the Smurf huts. But, overall, I'm just so glad we took the time to explore the region. It's different. It's a little more off the beaten path, but that's exactly what made it feel so special. And honestly, talking about it now is definitely creating a bit of wanderlust for me.
Of course it is, because looking outside, it's gray and it's actually cold.
I know. I'm already thinking about when we can go back and what would we do next. And you know me.
Yeah, I know. You're always planning a trip.
Always. But I think that just shows how much I genuinely love exploring this country. And this really was a discovery trip for us. And it was fun to relive it and share that experience with all of you.
Yeah. And hopefully inspire a few other people, right? To explore and a different side of Italy.
So if Puglia and Matera have been on your list, or maybe weren't, and now are, it's definitely a region worth discovering.
Well, grazie mille for spending time with us.
And we'll see you next time on Experience Italy with Friends. Ciao, ciao.
Ciao.
We hope you've enjoyed Experience Italy with Friends. If you like the podcast, remember to follow us and leave a review letting us know what you found to be the most helpful. And if you want expert advice or assistance in creating your own immersive and authentic experience in Italy, visit us at www.amicivacations.com.